All right, well, good morning and welcome. We're here for a special 30-minute one-on-one interview as part of our Innovations in Education for a Big, Bold Future initiative. And I'm here this morning with Rob Morphonius, who is the CEO of Kentucky Wired. And as folks who have been watching us know, really amplifying the discussion about the digital divide is something we've been focused on the last few months as the pandemic has shown a bright light on inequities in education, inequities in work, and inequities in access to healthcare. And so much of that being about the lack of digital infrastructure and access in the state that allows folks to learn remotely, work remotely, and access healthcare remotely. So I'm pleased to have Rob with me this morning to talk about the issue at hand, to talk about what Kentucky's doing to fix the problem, and to talk about his expertise in that area and his hopes on the horizon for how we close the digital divide. Rob, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
I gotta, congratulate you, Bridget, and the Pritchard Committee about your efforts that you all have been doing to bring attention to education and the connection to the internet, and the importance of broadband across the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. It is certainly a critical issue and will continue to be a critical issue as we move out of the pandemic and find new ways to work, new ways to learn, new ways to go about life. So we see this as a big part of achieving that big, bold future for Kentucky. And as always in everything, we would like to see Kentucky turn the corner on the track on the inside front, not the outside back. So that's our goal in the conversation about the digital divide as well. So Rob, just to kick us off, share with us kind of your interest in this issue. What attracted you to the issue of the digital divide in Kentucky, the broadband issue? What do you bring to the discussion?
Well, as being the lead for Kentucky Wired, I'm very passionate about the project that we're doing. We're constructing over 3,000 miles of high-speed internet broadband across all 120 counties of the Commonwealth. And this is a project that is unlike any other. In the past, many states, including Kentucky, has tried to fix the digital divide through smaller initiatives, either focused on just rural or through different counties and cities in different areas. But to do it really well and to really advance a state in the rankings across the U.S. For having access to broadband internet, you really need to do it across the full state and have every county participating. So what we're doing is we're building a network that takes broadband internet from the data centers all the way to every county in the Commonwealth. And we are constructing what's known as the Middle Mile Backbone project. So we are not the ones that take it to folks' houses. We are not taking it directly to every small business and every resident, but we are the first step of getting there, of having access to everyone across the state by putting in the network, the backbone to all these different counties. And then from there, the local service providers can connect to our middle mile network and then provide that supervice to those individuals, to those businesses.
So I think, a great analogy is the internet as a superhighway.
Yes,
the interstate highway, right? It's the information superhighway.
It is.
And so the middle mile is something like the highway itself with on and off ramps. Would you agree? And you need the smaller roads to actually get to folks' houses?
Yes, that's a great analogy. Similar to when they built the interstates across the U.S. to connect all the different regions, we're doing the same within the state to connect all the different counties. And the off-ramps, you might call it, are the local service providers that then take it from the network that we build to the local residents, to the local businesses. That's a good analogy.
Where, and kind of using that analogy a little bit more, I mean, the infrastructure, once we build the infrastructure, the information superhighway, an individual still needs a device, much like they still need a car to access the interstate. So that's an important part of this equation, that having the infrastructure there is not the whole of closing the digital divide. There are still other components, but this is a critical component.
It is, and it's the biggest, most expensive part of the step, is to have that infrastructure in place. To create thousands of miles of internet across the full state is a major undertaking. And I've got to compliment the state of Kentucky for taking this initiative. Again, they're doing something that no other state has done. It's been a real challenge. And we've really appreciated all the support that we've gotten from the legislators and the past few governors that have been in place during this term while we're constructing this. I think everyone has realized that once it's all in place, this will change the landscape of Kentucky. Not only education, but economic development, telemedicine, and of course now with the pandemic, it's never been more important than to have something like this in place. And the good news is we're rapidly completing our portion of this work. And then really what we're looking for is kind of a groundswelling.
Groundswell.
Yes.
Your use of that word.
Of locals, talking to their, internet service providers and saying, hey, Kentucky Wired is here. The network is in place. Are you attaching to it so that I can have that high-speed internet that everyone raves about?
So talk to us about where we are right now as a state. This initiative, Kentucky Wired, started over a decade ago.
Yes, I mean, it started quite some time ago in discussions, and we basically launched the project in 2015. And the discussions back then were, Kentucky is in the bottom 10% of the country in providing broadband internet to its citizens. So how do you solve that? And of course, front and center is the rural areas, because from a private industry perspective, sometimes it doesn't make business sense for large corporations to take internet out to rural areas to serve very few people. It doesn't pay for itself. So, this helps bridge that gap. It takes it to every county. And then from there, the locals, whether, they're doing it through their own initiative, through co-ops, through grants, they can find ways to build that last mile, capital investment along with their local service providers, and get access to the system. And
but that middle system. Yeah, that middle mile is so important to open up rural economies for kind of global competitiveness. Without broadband across the state, Kentucky is really at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to economic development and growing our economy, growing the quality of life in the state.
That's correct. And it all ties together. If, education, economic development, if you don't have high-speed internet to serve both, you need it for the education and you need it for the jobs for those that are being educated to move forward into.
So Rob, where is the superhighway now? Where does it exist, and where are you still building it?
It's we're constructing it, you might imagine it in rings. Okay, so we have 6 major rings that we're constructing. And the reason we do it that way is each ring circles back to the data centers. And so it gives us redundancy in the system. If there's an issue, a break or something at one spot, it has another path to go. So out of those 6 rings, we've completed the construction, the heavy lifting of the project on 5 of those 6 rings. So the last one being the ring in southwest Kentucky that is still progressing towards completion as well. So we're really starting to sound the horn now that, you know, this thing is becoming reality now. And there really does need to be a groundswell of support to start getting local service providers to start looking at Kentucky Wired and how do they connect. And by the way, there's a company that has been formed that is a partnership between the Commonwealth and some private developers that have created a wholesale company that basically exists just to sell capacity on the system. So let me talk about that a little bit. What we're building on the network has, if you look at it kind of as a conduit, we have 288 fibers in that conduit. And half of those are dedicated to strictly governmental agencies. Those are the first agencies we're connecting to. And then the rest of it is left as capacity to be leased to local service providers to run on the network. So there's great amount of capacity to be used across the state.
Great, okay, good. Rob, you mentioned that Kentucky was maybe is at the bottom of the national rankings when it comes to broadband access. Where will we be when this project is completed?
When this project is completed, you will easily be in the top 10.
And at the moment, we rank 45th, is that right?
Somewhere in that range, somewhere in the lower 40s, yes, out of the 50 states.
Okay.
So this will be, you know, transformable. I mean, this will transform the state.
For education, income, health.
Everything. And especially now, you know, we had what, 650,000 students sent home in April to do their schoolwork at home. And not everybody can do that. There are challenges. And so this is the first big step to solve those challenges.
So Rob, how is the project in Kentucky different from projects in other states? What makes Kentucky's approach unique? What gives Kentucky's approach an advantage to put us in the top 10?
Well, I think it's the approach that Kentucky is taking is they're putting in place a level playing field across all counties. Everybody will have the same broadband access as any other county, and it's not being done in just certain areas, but all counties. And again, you know, this has never been done before, and I think there will be a lot of other states that'll have eyes on the Commonwealth to see how well this works. And I think you'll see a lot of other states follow suit, rather than having patchwork of let's solve an area here or there based upon what attention the area got from their local government.
So this is really an opportunity for Kentucky to provide leadership to the nation. For Kentucky to capitalize on an economic competitiveness advantage that will, with this pandemic, serve us well in learning and healthcare as well.
Absolutely. It's just about every sector of business and education will be affected by this. And,
so very exciting. So back to my comment in the beginning about Kentucky turning the corner on the track on the inside front. This gives us that opportunity. And, you know, years ago, we would just talk about broadband access for broadband access, understanding that it's about economic development. But the conversation is really much different today because of the pandemic. So greater urgency and greater opportunity. So it's really exciting, the work that is happening. And we need a groundswell, no doubt, to make sure we get it to completion and we get homes, families wired all across the state. What are some of the, or what have been some of the challenges and the surprises that have arose in this project, being so unique, such a forerunner?
Yeah. Well, you know, this says, you know, first of all, the challenge has been, this has never been done before. So there was a lot of things that we had to get through to get to the project to where it is today. And you know, there's always, you know, physical challenges in the field. You know, geographically, parts of the state are different than others. And it's a very complex, high technology project and also very contractual related, because we have a lot of partners and stakeholders in this project. So to get everybody on the same page and moving in the same direction takes a lot of coordination. So, you know, we have solved all those issues, and we are, like I said, we're marching towards completion of this project here very shortly. And then we start the operations and maintenance of the system for the next 27 years.
And is that, will it be completed by the end of this year? Is that correct?
Yes, the majority of the project will be at substantial completion at the end of this year. All the fiber should be in place by then. And then, you know, we're constantly looking at the system over the time period that we've been building this. As you know, technology continues to evolve. So we're always looking at what upgrades do we need to make and when.
So as the project nears completion, Rob, what does the state need to consider for kind of future development, for technology upgrades, but also this critical component of the last mile, which is so much more important now since we are all social distancing, working from home. I'm doing this interview from my house today. I'm assuming you're in your home today.
Yes.
What do we need to consider for future development? How do we get the last mile?
Well, again, I think the citizens of every county need to, you know, be contacting their local government, some of the state agencies, whether it's the Kentucky Communications Authority or whether it's the Agency for Economic Development, the Center for Rural Development. There are a lot of agencies that are aware of our project and the impact it's making on the Commonwealth that can help connect people, whether it's business or personal or educational, on how they can make use of the network that we're finishing up and putting in place.
I had a conversation a week or so ago with Allison Davis, who is a researcher at the University of Kentucky and has partnered with researchers at Purdue University to do some analysis of the digital divide. She mentioned the importance of a statewide plan to get all homes wired in the state. Do we have that plan today? And in your opinion, if we have one, does it need to be revised, or do we need a new plan, a plan to start with?
No, I think the plan is essentially in place. You know, our network is now is fingering out into all counties. So now the plan is how to get your local service providers, excuse me, to connect to our system, and how is that to be done? And is there additional capital investment that has to be made by a county, a city, a local co-op, and how does that get done? So the local citizens at their local town hall meetings should be discussing how they're going to bridge this last mile.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it really needs to be a local conversation, getting the last mile accomplished. Are there barriers that we need to consider that need to be removed to allowing citizens to come together in unique ways and devise plans to get the last mile? You know, we've talked to the phone company in Jackson County and have better understood what they were able to do to get folks wired in Eastern Kentucky. But there seem to be challenges in Western Kentucky with the energy co-op, Kenergy, trying to do the same, but they're running into some challenges. So as we move into this kind of enriched public-private partnership space to get the last mile, what are some things citizens might need to be saying to their legislators, to others, to make sure these plans can actually come to fruition?
Yeah, I think a couple things there. I mean, as I spoke to earlier, there's a lot of stakeholders that help make up this whole network. And, you know, this system sits on the majority on, you know, different assets owned by different telecoms, utilities, all throughout the regions. So, you know, they need to be at the table with their local citizens talking about how they can bring this further in the last mile out to them. And then, of course, at the same time, government needs to be involved. There's a company called Open Fiber that is that wholesaler agency that the Commonwealth has created to sell that capacity. And all those folks need to be brought to the table to solve that last mile issue of capital investment, bringing it to the neighborhoods, bringing it to the businesses. How does that get paid for? Who's doing the work? And how do we connect to open fiber that leads us to the network that Kentucky Wired has built?
So just yesterday, Rob, we, as we listen to Governor Beshear provide guidance to school districts that now is not the time for our students and teachers to go back to a traditional in-person setting in our schools because of the pandemic. We have called on the governor to put together an emergency working group to figure out how to close this digital divide. And I understand that's, you know, that's the kind of the next steps after getting the middle mile completed. And you're on track to get that complete by the end of the year. But closing this digital divide is critical for the objectives of Kentucky Wired if it's about economic development and quality of life in our state. So what have you been saying to folks as they ask you about this digital divide? The fact that more than 240,000 K-12 students in our state don't have adequate access to the internet. And that number doesn't even include our post-secondary students who are now trying to stay on a career path in a digital environment. It doesn't include displaced workers who could have the opportunity to work from home if they have adequate internet. How do we close the digital divide? And I understand that's maybe a question past your expertise with the middle mile and Kentucky Wired, but you're passionate about this topic and you want to see this completed. So what are the next steps we need to take with great urgency?
Well, you're correct. I'm extremely passionate about this project and I want to see it successful. And the only way after we do our part of putting the middle mile and the network in place is to see the success on the last mile. And I think to solve that, you hit on it already, Bridget, is we've got to continue the conversation. And the conversations have to lead to action. And, you know, I know budgets are extremely tight from the federal government to the state government, to the local government these days, especially with the impacts of the virus. But there has to be ways to continue to fund that last mile capital expenditure, because again, in some areas, your local service provider may be willing to do that if it makes good business sense for them. But in other areas, it may not. And for it to happen, there's got to be some funds from somewhere that helps, bridge that gap. And I think there's a lot more work to be done and a lot more conversation to be had to finally solve the complete digital divide.
And the important point you made, Rob, I think, is that conversation has to lead to action.
Yes.
So this is not a time for putting together long-term plans. This is a time for real conversations about why the divide exists and how we can close it quickly,
Yes.
how we come together with unique responses and move to action quickly.
Yes, this is a critical part of our infrastructure now. It is something that we must have. It's like electricity, water. The internet now is critical to education, business, careers, everything now. So we can't just sit back and hope that it'll solve itself. It won't. Everyone has to come to the table and solve this problem and solve it now.
You know, Rob, the Pritchard Committee, we talk about the fact that in the 1980s, we were in the bottom of all of the national rankings for education indicators across the board, literacy, post-secondary attainment, you name it. Now, 30 plus years later, we've been able to say that we are in the middle of the national rankings, give or take, depending on which indicator you look at. So that's incredible progress, albeit not where we want to be, because we want to see ourselves at the top tier of all states. But it's really wonderful progress. And it's a tribute to a shared vision and commitment to a shared vision, action around a shared vision. And it's not lost on us that moving the needle on digital, on broadband right now, moving Kentucky from the bottom of the national rankings up to the top, as you've said we would be when this project is complete, is a way for us to continue, a critical way for us to continue our progress in education. And without it, we fear losing the progress that we've made over the last generation, because we must be able to deliver education in a very different way. And digital will be a big part of that delivery.
Yes. Yes, in doing this project, I've had a lot of interaction with our state legislators, and Kentucky, I can tell you, their representatives in our state General Assembly are passionate about this. They do understand that this is critical. And we have made great strides in this state, especially in economic development and access to broadband and education, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And there's with the COVID virus and the impacts it's had, it sucked a lot of attention towards that. But at the same time, this is one of the things that can help cure the impacts of the COVID. So we can't take our eye off the ball. We have to keep pushing.
This is an opportunity in the midst of a crisis. This is a key innovation that Kentucky was already on the path to realize. And Rob, this is not just a rural issue. Oftentimes we've thought of access really being a rural issue, whereas affordability is the urban issue. But that's not the case. Is that correct? We still have access issues in urban areas.
That is, you're correct. There are areas, even in urban areas, that are still patchy, that do not have good, solid, reliable broadband. I've heard the stories of some kids sitting, in their cars next to a fire station to get access to the internet. And
drive-in learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's not the solution, obviously. So yes, it is not just the rural areas. Urban areas have that issue, and that's why the state, initially looked at solving the digital divide in the rural areas, but then had the vision to say, look, why don't we just do this across the whole Commonwealth, and then no one will be left behind, no county. And I think that was great vision, especially at that time. again, we're going to be the first ones to ever have anything like this. And it will bring Kentucky, as we said, from the bottom of the bucket to the cream of the crop at the top.
Rob, there are cities, Chattanooga comes to mind, where there have been initiatives to increase, I guess, the adequacy of the internet, the speeds of the internet. Kind of a similar vision that Kentucky has for the state, but it was city-based. Can you touch on, just for a couple minutes, maybe the difference that made for small cities to come together around an initiative like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like anything else. Once you see one area, one urban area, and what the impacts are to having solved broadband access to that area, then everyone else looking from the outside in goes, "Hey, how do we get that? How do we do that?" And I've talked to local judge executives, and they're wanting to do things in their county, and they're now learning that Kentucky Wired is out there, and how do our citizens get attached to that network and make use of it. So there is a bit of a groundswelling of conversation starting, but we need to keep beating that drum. And yes, we have great examples now that our network is being completed, and we're starting to attach some of the government agencies, and the feedback that we're getting that is starting to make it out into the local media of how impressive the speed is and the reliability. That's going to continue to grow. And as that grows, I think the attention will become more and more focused on Kentucky Wired.
Yeah, this is the key to opening up economies across the state and to opening up learning in a new and different way. Rob, we continue to hold out hope that there will be some dollars in the next stimulus package that Congress is still debating. We're not seeing promising movement at the moment, and know the days are numbered, but are still holding out hope there. For our listeners, we've had close to 1,000 emails go to Congress asking for some support in the stimulus to ensure that we have the resources necessary to close the digital divide and make sure access and affordability is there for individuals. So we'll make sure the link to email to Congress is posted in the Facebook post of this discussion, so anybody that wants to appeal to their congressman can do so. And then we'll be having discussions with our legislators and encouraging local communities to have the discussion as well. We appreciate you, Rob, for joining us today to have this discussion. Appreciate your vision and your commitment to making this a reality for Kentucky, and your encouragement that this needs to be a groundswell all across the state to bring the infrastructure to life and ensure that it leverages all the opportunity in education, in workforce, and in health that it can. Rob, thank you so much for your work and for your time today discussing Kentucky Wired. We look forward to the completion of the project and the next steps.
Thank you, Bridget. It's been great being with you. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.